of the war, and we all had very strange heaters and ways of living at that time. But she was just a ray of sunshine, just the right spirit to enter the house when my father was away a lot, and my mother and the rest of the family was very worried. There's my father with Joan, and she's exploring grass. And such a good spirit from day one. Here we are, and my mother thought that she would console me with a doll. And for the most part, that was a nice idea, but basically I didn't really like the idea. But what I found out was that Joan was a better companion than any doll could possibly be. This is Joan with our great Aunt Bee, who painted. And that's the Price part of Joan Bredin-Price. Bredin is from our grandfather, who was an artist, and Price was from that whole family, but largely from Aunt Bee, who painted as beautifully as this, and painted many flowers. So we grew up with so many beautiful pictures around and just absorbed them. And she was a pioneer in her own time. And she recognized Joan right away and loved her. This was another wonderful ancestress. We were fighting over the penguin, but the panda was better because it was pushy and shovey and, you know, squishy. But in any case, our Emily was our grandmother, who was also a spiritual teacher and poetess. And she always worked to improve herself. And her prayer stool was so worn down that it actually, you know, it made a groove in the wood of her prayer stool. So that intensity, the spiritual intensity, came right down through. Emily was her name. Caitlin is Caitlin Emily. And Joan loved nature from the beginning, and if she wasn't eating it, she was smelling it. And our great, well, you want to go back to that? She was so cute, and she always was. So then we have a great uncle who was another wonderful mentor who would show us cows and streams. And he would just say, time to go out, and he would grab us by the hand and lead us into some really muddy, leech-filled place. And we would swim around. And there's Aunt Bee and Uncle Fred, and now Johnny has arrived, so now we're 3. And this is at the end of Rabbit Run Bridge in New Hope, and Fred has planted morning glories so that you know that Joni's morning glories come from a long history. And there she is admiring it. But what she did was draw. And she drew, like Taylor, a lot. Now, she didn't make music the way Taylor makes music. She does that too. But she drew from the beginning, and she drew on everything. So she was really a menace in the house, you know, if you cared about having a neat house, which I didn't, you know, but our parents did. So she would stand up on her crib, and she would draw on the wall, and she would draw on any surface. And later, some people moved into our house, and they said, you had the house with the angels all over them. And I said, yeah, did you like them? No. So I thought, well, that's too bad. She just did a good job decorating that house. So then we went to the cherry blossoms, you know, the obligatory childhood trip, and she grew older. And she tried the little athletic adventures, but that wasn't really her strength. But falling in love and having boyfriends, she was really good at. And so Ernie, this is Ernie. Ernie and she were very tight. Oh, that's Ernie, yep, at the dance. And Dad's crush of 9 million cast of characters is behind them. But she really loved Ernie, and she was with him for most of her high school year. And then she went off to Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, and he stayed home, so they broke up. While she was in high school, Joan got to do a lot of babysitting. And I did some of it, but then I went to college. But David just raised his hand. There he is. That's me! And there's where's the other hand? There's David. Yeah. And then she met John Sawfield, and she got married, and they're David and Tracy in front, and I have horrible glasses, and, you know, it's all very proper and sort of ultimately useless, but anyway. Except that, two magnificent children. This is Tracy wishing Joan goodbye. They had announced they were leaving for England forever. And but then Caitlin arrived. And I think this is one of John's art. They were up in Michigan. He was in art school, and Joan was teaching art and getting bigger. And then Caitlin arrived, and Caitlin had a baptism that was quite unusual for what was then a Catholic family. Joan converted, and I said to Joan, does the priest understand what sense you're making of it? And she said, oh, I don't think he cares. He probably did, but he didn't know. So they put some water on some Queen Anne's lace and did a procession around the house several times, and then sprinkled Caitlin with the water. It was really lovely. And there she is. Something special happened to the emulsion just for her. And then we met Nancy and George and Cambridge, and Martha came along. And where's Martha?
They're all here.
George has something with us.
George and Nancy.
George, stand up.
Where's George?
George, stand up.
Show what you brought.
Show what you brought.
There's
the vest.
And the
There's
vest.
the vest.
And George said, I never throw anything away. So this is in the Arboretum, I think, and it was just one of the best places to have a picnic. So that was the time of the war went on, and everybody decided to give up on the United States, and some were lucky enough to actually try to give up on the United States, so they headed for California and maybe Vancouver. They weren't sure.
In a van.
And we all had VW vans. We had 3 in a row in our driveway. Everybody's van was tailored. So there's Caitlin with her clover necklace. And what?
No, Caitlin.
Caitlin. Yeah, that was.
They look so much alike. I know.
And they're the cowgirls somewhere in Colorado or Jasper, so I don't know where they were at this point. And then I need to fill in that blank because I need the baby pictures, which I got and I didn't get in time. But there's Ian, who was just totally an adorable child. And Ian grew.
My mom cut my hair, can you tell?
It's perfect. And we had great Christmases together year after year, and we would always debrief afterwards and, you know, try to figure out the games that we bought the kids that were always too complicated.
Did you make anything with all that?
I had a great room.
Okay.
Yes. There was a long time
there forever.
Yeah, well, when we left, I took the loom out, so. But, you know, Nancy and I both.
Barbara, we would hide jelly beans in with the yarn.
No. Now, Karen in the back would appreciate that. Karen's a weaver. So Joan then began her Rosicrucian studies, and every week a lesson would arrive, and I would sneak a look, and I'd go, wow, that's really great. So I never said anything, you know, but it's a way, what she was learning sort of rained down on the people around her. She did a lot of Rosicrucian studies, and she began to revisit the symbols and remake them just the way Tracy said. She took nothing for granted. She absolutely started afresh. And I think this is a Persephone, one of the most powerful, I think, just incredibly powerful. And that's Pluto and Persephone. A lot more intense than the little Persephone that I could live with right over there. And this is in Pelham, and here's Donna and Guy DeVito and John DeVito and Joan and me. And it was so great. We moved to this house in Pelham, and it came with its own band. And so for several months we lived with them, and every once in a while the grate would open over the living room. Guy loves the story. And a cigarette, you know, what do you call it? A joint. Would drop down, you know, it was like manna from heaven. And they had four garden patches in the back. I lived in constant terror, because the police chief, who was really a nice guy, but he was on the prowl. Remember him, Curtis? You know, but everybody had their own theories about how to grow it. And Guy was the best. Way up to the sky, but Michael's, I gotta tell you, Michael's was not flourishing. Michael's was way down to the ground, you know, but I mean, Guy was going, chicken shit, that's chicken shit, gotta get chicken shit. Those were great days. There's Elizabeth. She's cooking with her little house, and next to, where'd you go? And this is the time when Joan heard the band, and she heard the music, and music would just send her right into orbit. And Peter's song, you can tell from Peter's singing, they played the Dream Merchant, and the amount of imagery that flowed with that was just extraordinary. There's Peter, and Josette, and Joan. And she drew angels, more complex, but her imagination was impossible to keep up with.
Don't rush.
This was one of the Dream Merchant paintings, and there's a whole series. There's a book that I made where I collected them, just trying to document what she did. I love this one. It's just magical. I mean, who would think of these things? And she would do things with brown paper bags. You know, I mean,
She made a Wookiee costume.
a Wookiee costume for Ian with brown paper bags.
Wait, was it a Wookiee? It was
Star Wars.
from Star Wars.
Yeah. With Star Wars. Absolutely.
Just like him.
So this is another Dream Merchant picture, and the person who bought it was the aunt of our stepsister's family, and I think it must be in Sweden. But she was a very theatrical person. She just totally loved it instantly. The minute she saw it, that's mine. So she took it. This is Frank Harrell. Some of you might remember from many years ago. Carmen and Frank have this. He was my co-therapist, and I just love him dearly. Nyla, Aaron's Nyla, loves this picture. So Joan joined the North Amherst School of the Arts, which took a lot of repairing, and she worked at plastering it and painting it, and it's just out of order could be. The name of it? North Amherst School, I don't know, it's called the Amherst School of the Arts. Yes, they had a gallery, the site of many students.
A great gallery, though.
That's right. This is Donna Martucci and Jasper, unless Jasper was the bus. No, named the bus too. Which was it?
The bus was Morgan.
Oh, the bus was Morgan, right. That was the biggest cat I'd ever seen. He would attack dogs. Hail, straight up. So this is Donna DeVitas from the Cups. She begins Donna. I know why Donna's there, because Donna gave her her first tarot. And Joan took to it like a duck to water and began painting tarot and revising tarot. All of the cards, it's a deck of cards. She did the whole tarot, and then she wrote about it. So it's a huge undertaking. This is one of the later ones. This is the last one, which is the Flow of Souls. And I think it's just one of the most beautiful things she's ever painted.
Where is it?
I don't know.
Oh, you
Barb, I
don't.
think I have this.
Who's
No,
that?
no, I think I have this one.
You do?
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Oh, I have a picture of it, you know, but I mean, I wanted to know that somebody
Yeah, I
had
don't
it.
know what to hold back.
I love it.
Who has the one? Who has the whole
Good.
deck?
Oh, the whole deal. Nobody does that.
Oh, we're looking for it. So anyway, so meanwhile the sibs are growing up, and whoops, sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, and I think Caitlin's having a little celebration at this time.
Back. There you go.
Well, it's sort of out of focus. It looks hard to see.
For sure.
Okay, here we are. Now, there's Elizabeth with Joan, and I have a great picture to add of Nancy with Joan, but I couldn't find it in time for the slideshow. So Nancy, I know you have that picture. Okay, this is our and she shed a light on our family too. So here is Catherine.
I'm here. I'm right here. I'm tech support, remember?
She's bigger.
Still is cute.
And this is my brother's wife, and Colleen, who came recently from Oregon, I guess it is.
Yeah.
And, gee, who could this be? Hi, Arla. And Ashley, but Ashley's not here, right? And Ashley again, and there's Kayla and Ashley. And then Caitlin and Joan. And then she meets, why is it all out of focus? She meets her hero. And life really picks up for her. And Indy. And Indy.